Hello and welcome, Matt Forde. Thank you very much for joining us on the Herald's UNSPUN podcast. How are you doing?
I'm good, and I need to apologise because I'm wearing an England shirt because we're recording this on the day of the semi-final, and I'm doing a load
That's
of.
right.
I do a podcast for Talk Sports. I'm doing lots of interviews today about the game tonight, and I've only just realised that obviously this may look culturally insensitive.
You know what? We'll
So I'm
try
not.
not give
This
you
is
too
not an
many
act of
pelters.
provocation. So
I know.
I'm
Hopefully,
sorry.
there'll just be people who are listening, and maybe the people who are watching on our YouTube or wherever will try not to be too provoked by that, Matt.
Okay, thank you.
But we've got you on the podcast because you are bringing an array of shows to the Fringe. Is that right, Matt?
Yes, two shows. A brand new stand-up show, Project Holy Moly, about everything that's happening in the UK and globally, and with my body. And my podcast, The Political Party, where I interview politicians, is coming up as well. So I've got Anas Sarwar, Stephen Flynn, Rachel Reeves, and Malcolm Offord as my four guests, and people can come and see it live.
Brilliant. And I just want to touch on your kind of, I guess, one-man show first. You know, your new show tries to make sense of global political turmoil, rising populism, and as you said there, your own, I think you've been quoted about this before, your own malfunctioning
Yes.
body, I think you've said. How much of Project Holy Moly is personal and how much of it is gonna be political? Just give us a bit of a flavour as to what it's gonna involve.
I mean, it's mainly about, we're going to have a new prime minister and everything that's happening with the Labour Party, but also, all the political parties are sort of rife for it. Everything that's happening with Farage, with the Greens, with the SNP. So they all get a good going over, the Tories as well, and Trump. But since I had cancer a couple of years ago, it's been a great source of material. So as well as doing all the usual stuff that people would expect from me, topical stuff and impressions, I think it's quite funny to talk about the changes to my body and the perspective it's given me, and the treatment that I require for things. It basically just allows you to do toilet humor, but with emotional heft.
Yeah, I was going to touch on that, Matt. So how's your experience with cancer? Has it changed what you find funny or what you no longer have patience for in politics? Has that become a big thing for you at the moment?
Oh, crikey! I mean, it's certainly, it reaffirmed my general view of life, which is that it is a great joy, and that even on bad days there are things to make you smile, and that it goes very quickly. And don't waste the good times worrying about the bad times, because bad times will happen. You can't we're all gonna die, it's inevitable. I've got so many friends that say, "Oh, my mum and dad are still alive, but what about when they're gone?" And you're like, "Well, deal with it then." Because you'll just look back and you'll have fretted while they were alive about their death. You just like, what a waste of time. So I just think, I just think life is magical, and even when things are difficult, there are pleasures that can be brought, whether it's football, music, food, whatever. Friends mainly. It's other human beings, I think. Whether there's been any political, I mean, I'm just fairly politically grumpy, I would say. In
So
general, I just find a
is
lot
that
of
is
it
that an older
rubbish.
thing or is that your is that growing older or is that what you've kind of gone through health wise?
I think it's the standard of politician that we've got now. I just think the
Hmm.
standard is, there are some excellent people in there in all parties, and I'm a great lover and respecter of politics, and I do admire anyone that stands for office. I think it takes incredible guts, and I realise these things are very hard. And there are some very talented, dedicated people on left, right, and centre, and on both sides of any constitutional debate. But I think certainly the standard at like leadership cabinet level is not great, and there are exceptions that we can all think of, but in general, I just think we've been quite poorly served, really, in the leaderships of all our major parties, and I find that immensely frustrating. I don't like the political climate we've created, the way we think about each other, the way we talk about each other, the way that we treat each other, and I think all of the major parties at various points have sort of been okay with their support, sort of obliterating their opponents in a way that is disgraceful and very aggressive. So I don't really like the way that it's gone. I have a lot of hope that it can change. But at the moment, I do find it immensely annoying. More than anything, just annoying.
Does that help as a comedian? Because I was going to ask, and you've kind of touched on it there. Is there a distinct role for political comedy when politics is increasingly becoming a wee bit more of a self-parody? We've seen recently Nigel Farage triggering this by-election in Clacton, with his main opponent going to be Count Binface. Does that make your job easier or harder? Because now it's become a bit of a self-parody.
I think it makes it easier because whenever people are following it, it's just easier. 10 or 15 years, certainly the pre-Brexit politics, people weren't really that engaged. Whereas people, that sort of by-election story, everyone knows it. So all that stuff really helps. And I think actually that a lot of people share my frustration and they want someone to take the mick out of these people and poke fun at them and hold them to account. And I think, particularly with the SNP, they've got away with it for a very long time with numerous scandals. I mean, the ferry scandal would have seen off any other government. It's just astonishing. And you got to go after these people. You got to highlight this stuff. And I think comedy's a really good way to do it. And
You're a supporter of Count Binface. Is he someone that you admire as a kind of politician? Can you call him a politician?
Well, I guess if you're standing for office, by definition you are, whether you're doing it for a joke or... I mean, I think it would have been funny had no one stood against him. I just think Farage out there on his own was the funniest option. I think this is the second funniest option. Sure. And I mean, if I was Binface, I'd try and win it. I would try and win it.
Yeah.
I would get Alistair Campbell involved and people like that and
advisors.
Get some resources. Yeah, go for it. He's there for the taking. I mean, I think there'll be thousands of people in Clacton who, one, don't want Farage as their MP.
You're fairly supportive of what Count Binface is doing. You think he should get a wee bit of momentum going with his campaign, bring in those advisors. Is that your message of advice? If you could give him any sage advice, would that be what you?
Yeah, I'd say take it seriously. You've actually got an opportunity here. Because then if Farage is not an MP, that changes a lot. It changes a lot. Equally, you want people in Parliament who actually want to be MPs. I mean, the by-election just shouldn't have happened anyway. The whole thing's a farce. And it's like public money just being blown on these by-elections. You're like, where? It's all that. It just drives me mad, actually. I do try and find the funny side. Equally, it drives me sort of mad. I think we sort of focus on all these dumb games. We could be talking about the future of the National Health Service or the welfare state or technology. And instead, it's always just sort of silly, daft rubbish.
I was going to ask you on that sort of point, is there a danger that comedy lets these politicians off the hook by, turning serious issues into entertainment? Or the other option is it can ridicule on that, can expose things, maybe conventional interviews, people like me as a political journalist can't expose us as well as maybe political comedy.
I think you've definitely got more license to be provocative and say things that you would never get away with, that would cost you your job. So I think that, I mean, equally, I don't think comedy's never really gonna. It's an entertainment form, and it's a nice release of pressure, and it maybe might help people think about a thing in a particular way. But I don't think it has much impact beyond being a laugh. Spitting Image didn't bring down Thatcher, and equally, Have I Got News for You was not the making of Boris Johnson. This idea that somehow, if you give politicians a platform to be comedic, that this is actually a pernicious thing, I really disagree with. I think if Boris Johnson is funny and he goes on a funny show and he's funny, fair play to him. I don't think that had really any bearing on him becoming prime minister at all. I think he was also a ruthless political operator, and the Tories are a sucker for a bloke like that. So it was more to do with his politics, really, and his political abilities. Much as they may not have been as obvious to some of us as they might have been to allies of his. Because actually, also, I want the political culture to improve, and therefore, you have to give politicians a platform to be themselves, as well as taking the mick out of them when they get things wrong or they say silly things. You also, I'm not a nihilist. I don't think they're all the same. I don't think they're all corrupt. I don't think they're all bad. I don't think people I disagree with are evil. I'm genuinely interested in them, and I'm interested into why people have drawn different conclusions to me, and they've led different lives, and they've got different priorities, and I think that's really interesting. And they are human beings, and if we sort of push politicians out and sort of not allow them into these places, then we dehumanize them. And there are really serious examples of why that's a bad idea. So I think I think I don't think it. I think it's basically a laugh. I think it's a laugh that has very little impact beyond the room. Is my modest take on it.
Well, that is very modest. And I guess when we're looking forward to your shows with these political guests, you'll know, I know they always come armed with rehearsed lines, what they want to achieve through these things. They'll have like a wee gag maybe in their pocket to seem more human and fun. But what's your technique for getting them to abandon the script and maybe reveal something genuine and unprompted?
Do you know what it is to just have a proper conversation with them, listen to what
Mhm.
they say, and go off what they say. In each interview, I'll think beforehand. There's maybe 2 or 3 things I definitely have to ask them, and I bear those in mind, and then everything else is up for grabs. And I think when you're talking to them, I'm just trying to have as normal a conversation as possible. I'm also looking for places to be funny.
Mhm.
But if they say something, I say, "What do you mean by that?" And then you get into a genuine conversation. It's an hour long. It's in front of an audience, and I think the time just makes it. If you just have a normal conversation, it's 5 or 10 minutes. Often the rehearsed stuff goes out of the window. And if you're asking them stuff they don't get asked elsewhere, about their life and their interests and their life outside of politics and what do they like and what do they don't like and what annoys them and what food do they hate, stuff like that, that
Mhm.
you get the person then.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just talk to them like I pretend that they're a normal human being.
Is it difficult in comparison to maybe interviewing someone who's not a politician? What's it like for you, Matt? Do you find it's like trying to, I guess I imagine it as trying to kind of strip off all the layers that they have created in this sort of facade of themselves as a politician and try and get to the human element. Do you find it difficult in comparison to maybe I don't know, it sounds odd to say this because they aren't robots, but in comparison to a normal human being?
Do you know what? In many ways, politicians can be the best interviewers because they talk a lot. Like that's their trade is
Mhm.
language and words. So the good ones are really good at it and they can express themselves really well. And they've often thought about things a lot. And that may surprise some listeners. But the really good ones are really perceptive people and actually are quite wise about not just the economy and the country, but about society and people. And often they are driven by some form of injustice or
Mhm.
trauma. The amount of them that have lost a close relative at a very young age, or feel, they have incredible stamina. I just think they're
Yeah.
amazing people to talk to. I mean, it's almost like interviewing sports people, and particularly ones that have had long or high level careers. When you're getting the behind the scenes stories of the financial crash or a conflict or COVID or anything like that, it's just incredible insight from people who have a lot of pressure on them. So my general view is I'm a huge admirer of them. I really care about politics and democracy, and I'm
Mhm.
I'm really pleased that people put themselves forward. I do get frustrated. I do think we need more talented people in there from a wider variety of backgrounds. Um, but I also do think they're fascinating people. I think to put yourself out there, to want that responsibility, when at the
Mhm.
moment, it's there's not much good news to spread about. You're talking about either tax rises or cuts. This is hard stuff. So I actually really enjoy it. And I just sit there and I think, man, I've got the best seat in the house, and I'm
Yeah.
opposite Gordon Brown or John Swinney or Nicola Sturgeon or Tony Blair or Nigel Farage or whoever. I just think, man, you're talking to the people that really shape the country. They have a huge impacts on our lives. And I'm just really pleased that they come on. And most of them come on and really enter into it and are fantastic guests.
Well, I want to touch on the guests that you've got coming up. So you've got 4, I would say, very, very different guests coming to Edinburgh. What do you most want to discover about each of them. Let's start off with Anas Sarwar. What do you want to discover most about Anas Sarwar? It's obviously been quite a difficult few years for him, especially after the Holyrood election this year and the defeats that they faced. What do you think you can get out of Anas Sarwar in this interview?
Well, I want to know what it's like to, and again, it is similar to sport. A couple of years ago, it looked like he was going to be First Minister. Then he's not. And what are the reasons for that? And is it all to do with UK politics, or are there things that Scottish Labour and he specifically could have done? And what are his reflections on that? And what are the things about Scottish politics that are different to politics at a UK level? And his decision to stay on. It's managing that. The expectation that, and then the defeat, and then deciding to stay, and what happens next. So that I've interviewed him a few times. I mean, he's one of the most charismatic people I've ever met, and he's always really funny. He's always got tons of stories. He's cheeky. He's charismatic. He's a phenomenal chat show guest. So I've done a lot of the other stuff with him before. So I think this time it's how did we end up here?
Yeah, and there has been a lot of rumblings, I guess, as to when and if he is going to step down as the Scottish Labour leader. That's obviously, I mean, if I were in your shoes, that would be something that I would probably focus in on.
Yeah. Well, I may well do,
yeah. Brilliant. And now we've also got Stephen Flynn, now MSP at Holyrood, used to be the Westminster leader. He's a pretty formidable political performer as well, I'd say. How do you get behind his performance in this?
Yeah, I mean, I've interviewed him before, and he's again charismatic, really funny, sharp wits, gives a bit back, loves a bit of needle. He's, again, if you think of it purely as a chat show, then he's a great guest because he'll have stories and he'll be able to ad lib and things like that. With him, obviously, his the nature of his ambition has changed. He now sees it obviously north of the border, and clearly has ambitions to be First Minister of Scotland. And you think, well, if the SNP slightly got away with it last time, then how soon does he make a move? Because the next election may be very different. Who knows? Yeah. So whether I wonder if that has sort of changed his calculus on how quickly he goes. But also, he's had a fascinating life with the disability that he had, and the abuse that he had when he was walking the streets on walking sticks, and people were abusing him because they thought he was, swinging the lead and getting benefits. He's a fascinating bloke. So yes, at what point does he make his inevitable move? I think will be the
when will his ambition strike? Yeah,
exactly, and also, does the SNP need to change and do things different? I mean, the culture of the party obviously has been under the spotlight, but does it? Is it always the de facto choice for? You sort of feel like, obviously, the unionist vote is split, which helps them, and the indie vote isn't really split. Alaba kind of tried. But you wonder if there was a sort of something different. I wonder if you had an SNP just without the sort of level of nastiness, whether that might be more appealing, or more to the point, had the SNP handled the post-referendum politics with more grace, whether things might be different. But also, for them, obviously, it's mainly about their record. All that time, all those resources, and what? For what? It feels like the whole thing's been a complete waste of time.
And it's interesting because I think people who maybe don't know Scotland that well or Scottish politics might see SNP having a really strong win here, but actually their vote share went down by 10% in the recent Holyrood election. So there is discontent. And for a party to be in power for so long, there's still plenty of questions. So yeah, it's quite interesting to kind of focus, I guess, on their record and how they maintain that win for so long.
Yeah, and I think at what point do they? This is a party that no one ever gets sacked. No one's ever really held to account. The culture of it is unlike any other party. I mean, and all the parties have their major issues. I'm not sort of minimising, but there's not a major party in UK politics that behaves like that. That goes through that, the scandal that is still unfolding and still may have some way to go. Just the absolute allergy to scrutiny. you know, the sort of loyalty it demands of its followers, of its parliamentarians is frankly ludicrous, and it creates a culture of cover-ups and secrecy and scandal, and clearly criminality, and it just sort of the scale of it actually has amazed me. Was that all this was all the way Swinney handles it, I just think is mad. You know, when he's asked about Nicola Sturgeon giving a no comment interview, and he says he's got no comment to make about it. You're just like, mate, you've got to have better answers than this. You've got to have better answers.
For a wee bit of devil's advocate here, Matt, do you think any other political party would handle it any better?
Oh yes, yeah, because they don't have that sort of and all political parties have scandals and sleaze, and you know, serious things happen. No other party behaves like that. It is distinct to the SNP, its political culture, and I really reflect on the way that politics has gone, and the behaviour in that referendum, I think, is one of the things. I just cannot believe that a mainstream party would behave like that, and then sort of pretend that it didn't happen, and then obviously Corbyn came along with Labour, and they behaved appallingly, and then Brexit happened, and both sides, you know, behaved appallingly. And I just think 2014 really was the first time mainstream politics had seen just a legitimizing of abuse and nastiness. I don't think it was completely unusual. It was so unusual to behave like that, and to allow your supporters to behave like that, that you could see that this was a very different sort of type of political operation, very secretive, ruthless, and there can be things to be admired about that. But no, I don't think any other party has behaved like the SNP, and then to do what it's done to its own supporters, then claim to be the victim itself, it is shocking.
Sounds like Stephen's going to get quite a hard time in the hot seat.
Well, maybe. I mean, I can't pin it on him. You know, he's I get on with him and I like him, and there are things. You know, obviously there are things that you still agree with people about, and with him, I think it's about his ambition and what would he do differently. Would this have happened under him? How do you draw a line under it? How do you move on? And it may involve them having to sort of break the habit of a lifetime and admit they've got stuff wrong. I just think it's so hardwired into the culture of the party to like not accept that you're ever wrong about anything. That's what makes them slightly different, I think.
And turning to, I guess, UK-wide party, you've also got Rachel Reeves coming on. I mean, given the turbulence around Labour, are you confident her job title or the questions you need to ask will be the same by August?
I mean, who knows? Who knows where she'll be? I mean, it's just absolutely fascinating that you'll have someone that either was the Chancellor, is the Chancellor, or is something else. You know, who knows where she'll be, but she'll be able to give a really good insight, obviously, into the first 2 years of a Labour government and the things that went wrong, the things that went right, the things that need to change. And then, obviously, who knows what role she's got, if any, under Andy Burnham. So that's what's amazing about that is we're all going to be in that room that day. And at the moment, we don't know what role Rachel Reeves is going to have. And the thing with politics, obviously, is that people are up, then they're down, then they come back. And she's still quite young for a politician, so I get the sense that she's got a lot of road left. Whether she would want to, I mean, you just see how brutal politics is and the effect that it has on people. You think, why would anyone do it? Do you know what I mean? I mean, I'm glad that people do, but you think, God, this looks really hard and really difficult. So, yeah, who knows? I mean, that's really exciting because we just don't know what role she's going to have. But I will definitely be asking her about, you know, all the big moments of the Starmer years, the things that have gone right, the things that have gone wrong, and yeah, how she feels about it all, and her immediate impressions of her new boss,
who may or may not be coming to the Fringe. I mean, he's listed. I wonder if he will make an appearance. I think one of their shows is actually very close to yours. So, I mean, we'll be waiting with bated breath, I guess,
Excellent.
to see if he turns up. But yeah, there's still quite a lot to unpack, I guess, around the turbulence that I guess Andy Burnham has, you know, caused, or at least, Keir Starmer, Andy Burnham fallout has caused in Labour that I'm sure you'll have plenty to talk about with Rachel Reeves on.
Yeah, and also no leadership contest. The Labour Party that prides itself on two things, sort of party of democracy and equality, has no leadership election to choose a prime minister, and again is led by a man. 126 years. The only major UK parties have never had a female leader. It's unbelievable. And it's always next time. Oh, not this time. Not this time. The party of equality says, we can have a lady next time. But girls, you just wait, because the fella's got to do it this time. And then next time it's your turn, we promise. I mean, it blows my mind. The Tories have had 4 female leaders. And why is it that a party sort of obsessed with quotas and equality and things like that never, of its own volition, chooses a female leader? I think it says a heck of a lot about it. And I find it immensely, I just find it insane. I mean, you could, if you were being uncharitable to the Labour Party, you'd say parts of it are institutionally sexist. That there is a sort of view that the fellas will do it. This idea that all left-wing people are progressive is something that I learned very quickly was not the case. People might be left-wing about jobs and wages. It doesn't mean that they're on board with everything else.
Completely. And it will be really interesting to hear, I guess, from a top woman in the Labour Party who's been, really top in the cabinet, as to what she makes of all of that. So I have no doubt that you'll be asking that, Matt.
I will. And you know what? She's always really funny. I've had her on 2 or 3 times and she's a really good laugh. And I think, again, I just find it really sad that there aren't more places for politicians to relax and be themselves. Around. It's why I created the show, was I wanted to see them be funny and be themselves. And she's a really good laugh. So I think that may take a few people by surprise.
Finally, Malcolm Offord, Reform Scotland leader. Bit of a segue. Have you ever spoken to him before?
Never, no. So I'm delighted he's coming on, because I've had some Reform people on in the past, Lee Anderson, and I had Farage when he was UKIP. And what whatever I think of them politically, they're a new political force across the UK. That they had a good result in Scotland, and it'd be interesting. Obviously, he's the newbie, isn't he? He's the new guy on the scene. How is he finding doing FMQs? He's sort of come from nowhere, really. He's not got a tremendous amount of elected political experience. So, why would you choose to sort of, effectively renounce your peerage to choose this life of a kind of opposition Holyrood figure, and is it everything that he expected? And also, it's interesting that, obviously the narrative for a long time from the SNP was, we don't have Reform up here. It's not the sort of politics that exists in Scotland. It turns out it does. And I wonder what the ceiling is, if any, on it, how far he can take it, and whether he's the right person to do it. He may have had a good result this time. Do they need someone else? So just his view of his own leadership. And I just think it's always interesting when you get new characters on the scene. I interviewed Zach Polanski a few months ago. You're like, well, these are like the new players, aren't they? You want to have a look at them.
Yeah, from he is a multi-millionaire. He has yachts, as we know. What's really motivated him to take on quite a difficult job, where no doubt he'll have quite a lot of hate to deal with in Scotland? They did get a good result in Scotland, 17 MSPs, but he has spoken quite a lot about harassment that he's come up against, hate. It will be really fascinating to also. I'm dead interested to see how he does with comedy and taking himself not so seriously. I think that'll be quite interesting.
Well, I think they have to trust me, and I can't let, in a way, I mean, my politics sort of come through. I'm sort of clearly centre left. But I would never break my own rules. I would never give someone a harder time because I disagreed with them. I will interview those 4 people in exactly the same tone and manner. I'll react to what they've said and the way they behave, but I'll be as generous of spirit with all 4 of them because I'm genuinely interested in them. And often, I think it's more exciting to talk to people you disagree with. I think it's way more entertaining to hear from someone, because you think, how on earth have you ended up thinking that? When obviously, to me, it seems so obviously not a good idea, but to him, it's a great idea. So, convince me. And also, everyone, we are still human beings, and
Mhm.
I think even people who are sort of wealthy have still had hardship. I think of David Cameron a lot and his son and things like that. And you think it's really easy on the face of it to go, this is just a guy with just total privilege. But I bet he'd give it all up. Of course, he'd give it all up for more time with his son. And you think you're still affected by the human experience. Wealth obviously relieves most people's biggest stress, which is financial security. But it doesn't cure other things. And however wealthy Malcolm Offord is, I'm sure there have been parts of his life that have upset him, things that he would do differently. So I'm interested in that stuff as well.
Brilliant. Well, we look forward to it. And thank you very much, Matt, for joining us on the Herald podcast.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.